The Way of Kings has the best and the worst prologues I have ever seen in the world. I have a theory here, okay? I think what ended up happening is that Brandon Sanderson technically became too famous and now he could write whatever he wanted. And this is what I attribute to the slow and terrible loose beginning of The Way of Kings. Because the way I read this book initially in the first place was that I actually DNF'd The Way of Kings. I didn't finish it. And I dropped it for a very specific reason, okay? And that was everything that happened felt pointless. Everything that happened felt useless and there was technically no point to it. And what I felt was that something better could have been done. Something tighter could have been put together. And technically speaking, I think that could have been done in much the same way with Mistborn and Elantris and, you know, all the other Brandon Sanderson books. An editor could have edited this to make it better and to make it more, impactful and tight, in much the same way with the Game of Thrones, the first book in the A Song of Ice and Fire epic. And technically speaking, this was a major problem I ran into. But I said in the beginning, The Wheel of Time has the best and the worst prologues I have ever seen. Why? Because that's an important question. I said the best and the worst. So let's actually examine the Wheel of Time prologues and let's look at what ended up happening and why such a statement as, oh, the best and the worst, it actually still makes sense. I love this book. I'm talking about this and I think it's a really genuine criticism because a lot of the time Brandon Sanderson with The Way of Kings, he is technically loose. I mean, with the backstories that we get with Kaladin in the story, the flashbacks, they really could have been told in a sentence. And I'm not joking. All of these flashback chapters could have been a sentence or at most a paragraph. Some of the times you're just not going to get it right. And this is what a lot of people are not technically, sort of willing to think of or at least acknowledge when they talk about Brandon Sanderson. He's so good, he's so great, he's so critically acclaimed that you forget he's a human. People forget that Brandon Sanderson is a human. The first 200 to 250 pages, the only story in there that engaged me on any level, the only story in the beginning of the first 250 pages that engaged me, of all these things, of all these events that Brandon was spinning, Kaladin and his struggle with depression and his arrival at the war camp. That's it. Let's talk about the first prologue because of all the 3 prologues in this story, 3 prologues. Of all these 3 prologues, I think this one, the first one, is the worst among them. And it is the most tropic and the most cliche-ridden of all these. Of course, it's, the epic fantasy story. You know how it goes, right? There's going to be a prologue some many years ago, right? And you come across this in a lot of classic fantasy, not necessarily modern fantasy. And that, at the heart of it, is why the first prologue is bad. Does it get me interested? No. You would think all of this epic stuff Brandon is spinning interests me, but no. Toward the end of the story, you're gonna understand why. You're really going to understand why that first prologue is epic and nice. But other than that, you have to go through 1,000 pages to appreciate this prologue. And by definition, because of that, it's really just not good, okay? If you are going to write a story, the audience must be able to appreciate the first sentence, okay? And that is much better way of writing a story than, okay, give me 1,000 pages and I will get you hooked, okay? Technically speaking, it's not a good prologue. But that gets fixed in the second prologue. This is the second best prologue. We still haven't reached the best prologue, okay? And as far as it goes, this prologue is better because in terms of storytelling, it's much more interesting. You have, by the way, the opening line to the second prologue. Oh my God. Imagine if that was the opening line to The Way of Kings. This should have been, in my opinion, the opening. We're introduced to this assassin, is Veth, and he is technically a badass. But on top of that, we are introduced to actually a lot of the magic system here. And we are also introduced to the general politics. And it's sort of a prequel chapter. And it's going to establish the war between the Alethi and the Barshendi and why that war is happening. It's way more entertaining than some dudes who are coming together and plant their swords and walk away. Like that, come on the day he was to kill a king versus some guys who are putting down their swords. Think for a second. I want you to think for a second. Which one would you rather read first? first, and that is the contention here. And so I think the second prologue is the better prologue, and it is in fact the second best prologue. The best prologue is the prologue with Sen. And in this particular prologue, not only are we introduced to what I consider the protagonist of the story, Kaladin, but on top of that, we're introduced to this boy called Sen, and he's sort of amateur. And the reason why I say this prologue is the best prologue in this story is primarily because, again, as I told you in the beginning of the video, I would rather read about Kaladin and his struggle with depression than the Knight's Radiant or read Dalinar's dreams. Technically speaking, those dreams, there is really nothing emotional I can connect with. But talk about Kaladin and his struggle with depression, that's a deep, impactful story. It hits me on a deep level, right? And so I'm that kind of reader. Right? And this prologue, the third prologue, it's the most personal. Guess what? This boy is going to die. He's an amateur. And Kaladin, his personal belief, his character is that I will protect those who cannot protect themselves. Do you see what is happening? So this prologue, not only does it engage me more because it's a personal story where the POV character could die, right? But on top of that, we are actually introduced to the character of Kaladin. And we understand Kaladin before we even meet him for the first time. This prologue is brilliant. It actually showcases why Brandon Sanderson is such a good character writer. Even though he doesn't have a lot of characters with flaws, he just knows how to get you to understand his characters remarkably well. Number two, he knows how to test his characters. And this is why I love this prologue out of all the three. This is the best prologue in The Way of Kings. In fact, it's the best prologue I think Brandon Sanderson has ever written, in my opinion. Okay, simple as that. It's literally a showcase of why the man is a master artist. It's a showcase of his mastery over the fundamentals. I hope that you enjoyed, and I hope that you took something from this. Have a nice day.